Hi and welcome. I'm Abby. You are listening to Stories Lived, Stories Told, and here's what I know. The way we choose to communicate matters so much for the kind of social world we want to create for ourselves. There's so much in our social world that I think feels so far outside of our control. But how we communicate is one thing that we absolutely can control. We have choices, and sometimes it's easy to forget because we get so stuck in patterns that we forget that we have a choice. But we do, and it's no small thing that we do, right? Everything we create in our social world is created through communicating in one way or another. So I think it's worth taking time to learn about our communicating and specifically how we're communicating through stories. The stories that shape us, the stories that we tell, the stories that we don't tell, the stories we've never heard before, and asking why about all of these things. Today we're continuing our conversation with Zev Burton. At this point, I will suggest you go back and listen to part 1 of our conversation if you haven't done that yet. I'll link that in the description. As we know, Zev graduated from Georgetown with a bachelor's in international security and is currently working on his master's in data science and analysis. He's written a book, Two Fish in a Tank, How Jokes Can Give Hope to a Fractured World, and he uses TikTok to discuss important social issues. Our conversation with Zev today focuses a lot on humor as a powerful tool for people. Some questions I'd be considering as you join us in this conversation is, how is humor a form of communication? What does humor mean to you, and what role does it have in creating your social world? And what role could it have? So, with those questions in mind, let's jump back into our conversation with Zev.
I remember on Twitter when there was a nuclear issue going on in China or Russia or North Korea, and World War III was kind of the trending thing. Like, we're headed towards World War III. That was one of the funniest days on Twitter I've ever seen.
You wouldn't expect that, yeah.
Because humor is also a coping mechanism.
Sure.
Like, not just in terms of personally, but societally.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
like when that happened, absolutely hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the funniest things in the world. Terrifying, but with terror also comes humor in a strange way, because you are subverting, as you talked about before, you're subverting the expectation that everyone's going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to get drafted. And it's like, oh my God, I'm finally chosen for something. It feels nice to be chosen first.
Right.
Like,
yeah. I could see that, I think you have years now of evidence through the pandemic of how people used humor as a coping mechanism, because I would see things and I'd be like, that is so horrible that people are joking about this. So many people are dying. And that's funny because it's true, because we can all kind of relate to that. It's a real, there's layers there. That's why it's both and, both of those things are true. That, we can still speak humor and absurdity into these situations that are deeply painful.
And this isn't just a like Gen Z, or I guess we are like elder Gen Z thing.
Yeah.
It's also like you see it at all ages.
Mm-hmm.
For part of my research, I went to Facebook groups of like moms talking about the pandemic.
Yeah.
Or dads talking, or grandmothers talking about the pandemic. It was 95% memes.
Yeah.
They weren't good memes.
Right.
I didn't think they were funny, but they had like the little laughter reaction thing on Facebook. I think sometimes there's a thought process that, oh my God, Gen Z makes light of stuff so often. Like, no, everyone's always made light of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like that parody is historically something that parody and satire has been around since before, like since the Greeks, since the Romans.
Yeah, way before Gen Z.
I went back and looked at like caveman art, and there was parody there. Like it's just wild.
Yeah,
how long humans have used humor as a way to mock those in power, mock circumstances, or communicate.
Yeah, I think that when you say, people could be critical of, like you're saying, younger generations, but really everybody for making light of something that, shouldn't be made light of. And I think there's a parallel between what you said earlier about optimism or positivity, which when I hear those words, the connotation is like, it is a very surface level thing.
Yeah.
And that is kind of a parallel in my mind of making light of something. But I don't think that's what's going on a lot of the time, because if you dig past that layer, especially if you look at people in Gen Z, is that you have an ability to use humor, and you have the most heightened sense about social justice issues, in my mind, of any generation, because things are starting to be talked about more. That's why I see it that way. And so it's not a making light with only a surface level understanding. It's almost like the humor comes out of the depth of knowing just how painful all of these things are and how big and how important they are. And that's what leads to the humor. Not that we're like, it doesn't matter, so we can make jokes about it.
There is a term called the John Oliver effect.
Okay.
That goes exactly what you're talking about, where just by the nature of being on John Oliver, like having a topic discussed on John Oliver, you will see actual change happen.
Interesting.
Because more people during the height of John Oliver and Last Week Tonight watched that than the local news, than national news. There's a reason HBO's let it gone on for so long and even given it a ton of money to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Where you will see tangible changes that occur after something is aired.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say you can see those changes by looking at data, yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm looking at, especially at political-based data and FCC comments for net neutrality back in 2017 or so, not a lot of comments on there. So basically the FCC, whenever they are proposing a policy, they are legally required to open it for public comment. They don't have to take in, they don't have to care about the comments, but they have to at least allow the option of it. There weren't a lot of comments. Like, it was mostly advocacy groups. People are really into it for net neutrality, which is basically internet providers like providing the same service to everyone. That's a very simplified version, but on a base level. John Oliver did a segment on net neutrality. Comments increased exponentially and negatively, saying, no, this, like, they were trying to repeal net neutrality. And they were like, no, don't repeal this very good thing that happened. And, there was one quote I read by a writer on Last Week Tonight who I got to talking to. And he was like, yeah, humor is the vehicle that we get people on our show and people watching our show. You wouldn't watch any of the comedy late night shows. I'm talking mostly about like Last Week Tonight, a while back, when Jon Stewart was doing The Daily Show. People went to it for the humor and stayed for the message. Yeah.
That's such a communication perspective too, because on a very basic level, people are like, okay, communicating, it's the content is what is the most important. And of course, yes, the content is important, but almost what's more important is the how. The how you communicate the what is what's so important. And it lines up with that language you're using of being a vehicle. What vehicle are you using to communicate? So humor is like one of those options. It becomes obvious to me why the how matters when using an example like what you're talking about, looking at any of the things that John Oliver has ever said. If he said it in the way he said it, which was probably with humor, versus if he had said it not in a humorous way, I would hit entirely differently. It would even have different meaning. And so that is so obvious to me of like, ding, 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 duh, the how matters.
And part of it is the juxtaposition there, because there's a point whenever someone who is transmitting something with humor where they get serious. That is very big part of it. Like, it is something you see all the time. And the juxtaposition you have between absurdity and seriousness draws the listener in. It may not feel as intentional as it is, but when writers write for a comedy show like that, they will actually mark where they want to get serious. They will say, we need to have a very big joke and then come down for that juxtaposition to occur. And then once the serious part is over, we got to bring it back up.
Mm-hmm. It's very intentional.
I think the idea that comedians are naturally funny is bullshit.
Yeah.
No, they're just very good at being intentional
Mm-hmm.
and communicating ideas.
Yeah, and building jokes and understanding those layers of humor. That's neat. That's really neat.
Like I talk to comedians all the time, both in the DC circuit, just through TikTok, and you talk to these people, no one's really that funny. Like they
Right.
just know it works.
Yeah.
And there's always the thing like, oh, tell me a joke. No,
Right. Right. It doesn't work like that.
no,
Mhm.
because comedians will do the same. It takes 2.5 years to build a 60-minute Netflix special. Like it takes a long time to get every word, every movement, every breath, every pause in particular down.
Well, tell me about what you're doing on TikTok.
Trying to do just that.
I thought so.
A lot of what I do on TikTok is an attempt to bring a comedic lens to political and global issues, particularly just due to my background, anti-Semitism and Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much focused on the idea that if you can entertain people while teaching them, you are going to drive change a lot more than proselytizing or just saying that's anti-Semitic. And that is a theory of like communication and changing minds that
Yep.
I don't know academically how that's been studied, what's that called, what's anything, but it's just kind of the vibe and idea I have that I know a lot of others have as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on.
I mean, it's worked. Like,
Yeah.
I have built a fairly decent follower base because of it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's fun. Like,
Yeah.
that's the other side of things. Like, I won't make a video that I won't want to watch myself. So it's fun to make. It's fun to write jokes. It's not fun to fail when they flop, but it's really fun when it works.
Yeah. Where did your desire to start having these conversations on TikTok come from?
So I was in DC on January 6th. I fully saw police go past my window.
Mm.
I fully saw all of that happening in real time between like the TV I was looking at and looking outside.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment there where I was like, shit, this is what I studied. I know far too much about domestic terrorism and how that messaging works, especially with regards to social media. At the time, I had maybe 5,000 followers. That was just through like math and kind of shit posting content. And shit posting is an actual academic term now.
Right.
It was used in the paper. And I realized, oh my God, people don't understand. Like, it's not malicious. It's not intentional. Like, it's just not knowing. It's not knowing, hey, that flag's not good. Hey, these are the dog whistles that you see. And just trying to clarify that at some point. And then I started getting a lot of those dog whistles in my comments. I was like, oh shit, I unlocked Pandora's box here because now I'm getting called everything in my comments. Oh no. Let's respond to this.
Yeah.
Like let's make a few jokes about this.
Yeah.
And then also like getting banned from TikTok myself, getting stuff taken down.
You got banned?
Very briefly. It is not something a lot of people know because I was talking so much about anti-Semitism and actually like talking about swastikas and like being like, oh my God, here's a swastika in my comment. The algorithm, going back to like the data side of things, because I understand that.
Yeah, it's the way you see everything.
Is unable to discern context. So the way a lot of these algorithms work is, especially when it comes to image and video processing, is they will look at it frame by frame. They will say, is there anything bad here? Is there anything bad here? Is there anything bad here? And when you've got a dude showing a swastika, I totally get it. 100%. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. I get it. I will avoid that. Or showing the Confederate flag. So I was lucky to have a person on TikTok that I could contact that I knew through some other stuff I had done and be like, hey, I don't know if you can do anything, but it'd be really nice if you got this back. And within like an hour, I was back.
Well, good for you.
Yes, I got super, super lucky because a lot of times that doesn't happen, especially when it comes to people in similar industries in politics. But then I started talking about all of that. Ended up answering a lot of questions. Ended up taking a break for a little bit because of the anti-Semitism I was facing. Came back with a vengeance, and now it's just like this fun thing I can do and educate people in a comedic way about anti-Semitism that comes across, about politics that comes across, about the Jewish view of politics a lot, because that's not exactly used often in our Christian Jesus-based government.
Yeah, right. I was going to say the perspective that you know, from what I understand, the perspective that you seem to be talking about a lot, especially in the TikTok space, is one that is not the dominant one. And I think maybe interestingly, it is also not the main or most visibly oppressed or disenfranchised one either. And so maybe you end up falling through the cracks a little bit. And that's why conversations about people of other races, other ethnicities, maybe their conversation is a little bit more visible than the Jewish perspective, the Jewish experience in the United States has been. Not to make that a blanket experience, but you know.
There are a lot of reasons for that. And like, I'm not making any attempt to play like oppression Olympics or anything like that. All the struggles are very valid, especially like no use in picking fights with each other when we can pick fights with the oppressor. Unlike nearly every other form of discrimination, Jewish people are seen as somehow both controlling everything and devilish. When someone says, oh, you control the banks, you control the weather, oh, you killed Jesus, all things that have been said to me in real life, not just on TikTok. We are somehow both seen as too powerful and oppressed. As in, we are controlling the world through puppeteering. And it's very hard to talk about, that, because it is unlike most realms of oppression we see because of that. Because historically, the reason why we get tied to banking and money so much is because it was the only job we could get. No one wanted to be the tax collector. No one wanted to take money. So Jews were like, all right, we're going to do it. Only reason people say we control the media is because we weren't allowed in original communications and TVs and movie studios. So we went and set up Hollywood and we just did it better. So it's a very strange divide.
Yeah.
And part of that is something I'm trying to fight. And all I ask for is like consideration, especially with regards to religious liberty. There's a very strange thing there in the conversation where it appears as if there's a dichotomy, as if you're pro-religious liberty or you're like, fuck religion. And there's this third spot there, like being, okay, religious liberty is fine, but don't be a dick about it.
Right.
Or like, don't try and force anything on it. Or your restriction is my religious liberty. And think about it that way. And I think that is a perspective that often comes from the Jewish side of me that you don't get a lot in conversation. So what I do is try and introduce that.
Yeah.
And to do that, you gotta be funny. You gotta be entertaining. You are fighting the swipe of a thumb at all times. Like, people are looking for a reason to swipe, and you've got to give them a reason to stay.
Interesting. Yeah.
My most popular video is a synagogue in Florida was suing about the abortion ban because in Judaism, you are instructed by God, if you read the text literally, which I don't, but in terms of the story, we are instructed, we are told it is our religious obligation to protect the health of the mother. And they sued, citing religious liberty. And I was reading the story like, shit, I gotta share this on TikTok. How am I going to get this to do well? Time to play into some anti-Semitism. And I opened the video with, the Jews are at it again. Like, people in the comments were like, oh my God, I thought I was on the wrong side of TikTok for a little bit. Maybe choose a better opening line. But every single one of them saw the entire video.
Yeah.
It worked. It worked. Was foolish, deceptive, and framing was a little bit dishonest, but it worked. I got called out by actually by a Jewish organization for a few of my TikToks because I employ a lot of the tropes that are used against Judaism as a way of subverting them, which is very intentional.
Yeah.
I got called out and said, like, hey, very, very publicly, hey, you are continuing with anti-Semitic tropes. And they didn't look into me. They didn't know I was Jewish. They were like, you're making fun of Jews when you do this. I was like, okay, weird. And like I made a video about that, being like, wow, they're really right. Two Jews can never agree on anything. And whenever you use humor, you just kind of get a lot more, I don't want to say views, but views. You get a bigger audience. You get people willing to stay around.
Yeah, but if those views, which seems like maybe a superficial thing to talk about, translate into people hearing your message, then that is really powerful.
Without a doubt. That's why media companies exist. That's why advertising exists.
Yeah.
Getting people to hear is so important.
I feel like you've shed some light on the stories that are currently or have historically been told about Jewish people and the experience of Jewish people. And so I'm wondering just if you can frame it in terms of stories. What are the new kinds of stories that you are trying to share through your TikToks?
Traditionally, the stories about Jews have been one of power, one of control, one of like having little horns, all the fun stuff. They are like kind of funny, the absurdism that people believe. I think part of it is reframing, hey, that's not us. And trying to be like, I understand there aren't a lot of Jews in the world. The only media people hear, the only stories people hear about Jews are often these wives' tales or some sort of anti-Semitic trope that people hear, whether it's through the media, whether it's implicit or explicit.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, I went to high school in Indiana. I was the first Jew a lot of people had met. Someone once actually came up to me and said, hey, I've got a big test tomorrow. Can you make sure we have a snow day? But trying to introduce new stories, I think, is the interesting one.
Yeah.
To try and frame it in this realm of storytelling, because I think you're absolutely right. The idea of framing it within stories is the right way to do it, without a doubt. For me, it's not what kind of stories am I telling, because I don't have the privilege of choosing what specific stories I want to tell. Like, I'm just trying to tell a story. I'm trying to get people to listen to any story.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's huge, probably, actually, because something, in the podcast, in the theory that this is based in, is looking at stories and the stories that you live, the stories that you tell, and then in between all those, the stories that aren't heard, the stories that aren't told, the stories that are untellable, and a million other stories. And part of that comes not just from, oh, well, that's an untold story because that person chose not to say it, or that's an unheard story because of whatever reason. It's not just on a personal level, it's also the systemic level. And so societally, what stories have been privileged? And the answer is not the ones you're trying to tell. And so that's why it makes sense that in, I don't know, the early stages that you are in right now, in the current, culture that we're in, it would be extreme to say that you're at a point of doing anything other than just trying to be heard, just trying to claim that space in a way.
Especially when it comes to politics and stuff like that. Just because that's my focus, like what I said, I live in DC, you can't really get away from politics even if you tried. And just trying like to have a seat at the table. And I understand I have privileges that come from, like, I'm a white male. I'm a 6'3" white male. DC politics was handmade for me. Having a seat at the table and being heard, like, I have so much going for me. I am already so much closer to the finish line than most people.
Right.
And if it's hard for me to do this, I cannot imagine how undeniably difficult it must be for someone dealing with much more visible differences, where you can't tell someone's religion by looking at them. You can tell if someone's white. You can tell
Yeah.
typically like what gender someone is.
You can tell people are white, or at least white passing, or gender, or at least how they're presenting. And it's almost more about that presentation, or, you know, what you think, because then certain privileges are afforded based off of how you're perceived, even less than, you know, who you actually are, what identities you actually carry. But yeah.
I am lucky because I've been able to build up a platform over some time.
Mm-hmm.
There are also a lot of people who don't have that platform. I was able to build it through some hard work, but also just luck, like luck of the algorithm. And I made a few videos not about activism or Judaism or communication at all. Part of it is doing what you can to build an audience.
Well, in the way you talked about humor earlier, is that it's not a fluke. It's all very strategic. And so even something like that is part of the strategy of claiming space and being heard.
Without a doubt.
I really appreciate all the insight of this conversation. I think you have a great perspective that is not one that, you know, I've experienced for myself. And so I think that's awesome.
You are welcome in the data sphere whenever you choose to do it.
Always learning. So what I want to end on, though, is, you know, maybe a little bit of a chance to summarize things that we've already touched on. But because, you know, how we define a better social world does look different for everybody. And so I'd love to hear what a better social world looks like to you.
I think that at its most basic level, the best social world is one where people have the opportunity to prosper. That means they feel safe. The Cold War example I talked about earlier, where people were under their desk out of fear for a nuclear strike. People weren't willing to go out and prosper because they were terrified.
Yeah. Survival, not thriving. Yeah.
Right. And in addition, there's like, you can't prosper if you are trying to find food. You can't prosper if you don't have a house you can sleep in. You can't prosper if you don't feel safe within your community, not even just internationally, but within where you live. You can't even prosper if you don't have a place where you can call home. Not just like a structure, but a place, an area, a region that is home to you. So for me, I am very influenced by like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I think like it's not that good once you get kind of above the bottom two levels.
But the idea that there's certain needs that have to be met before you could do things like be creative and prosper and what, you know, ... It makes sense.
I like to read. I like to read physical books. I couldn't do that without a job. I couldn't do that without a place to store them. And I think the better social world for me is a place where people have the necessities they need for the opportunity to thrive, for the opportunity to do what they can do well.
Well said.
There's a lot of times you see like people just aren't able to do stuff. And we are missing out greatly in kind of a selfish manner as well. Like there's talents out there beyond our wildest dreams who can't showcase their talent because they have to worry about food on the table for their children.
Yeah.
We are missing out on so much because we continually forget that people are people. That's the big gripe I have with data, is this focus on data and optimization and how can we get the best bang for our buck. It shouldn't be about that. It's how can we like create the most potential bang for our buck. But our system isn't set up that way.
Yeah. In my eyes, a better social world is definitely one where people's humanity is maybe more of a driving force than something like profit, you know, where
without
human dignity, human rights is at the core of why we do what we do, to increase those, to strengthen those. And I think a part of better social world for me too is kind of what we were just talking about ending on, is a world where everybody's stories have the equal opportunity to be heard and to be validated. One of the things I think about is like the way that the experiences of men, and specifically the experiences of white men, are like normal or like default almost is the word, in that if a man is talking about his experience, it's easy for people to extrapolate and say, oh, that is a story about what it's like to be a human. If I tell a story, it's like, oh, well, that's what it's like. That's a story about what it's like to be a woman. Or maybe if you were telling a story, that's a story about what it's like to be a Jewish person. My story is just as much a human story, a story of the human experience as anybody else's, because there's so many different kind of ways of being human, facets of being human, of our identity, that it's all stories about what it means to be human. Just some have been valued over others. And so It's a Better Social World is one where all those stories get kind of the same platform to be heard and valued as human stories.
There's a very great old College Humor video. I don't know if you remember College Humor or anything like that. But it basically is set up like a panel about like Willy Wonka type candy creators.
Okay.
They've got like this boring, bland white guy who's asked like, how much fun is it to get to live around candy and create new candies? And he's just like, yeah, I suppose it's really fun. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the confectionery industry. And then on the other side, you have a woman of color who's so much more lively, so much more joyous. But the questions the reporters asked her are like, what is it like to be a woman of color in a traditionally male-dominated industry? How can you be the example? And what do you want to tell all the little women, confectioners of color out there?
Yeah.
And like the juxtaposition that we see where people are expected to tell identity-based stories,
right,
by force almost, as opposed to by choice.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very obvious version of tokenism, you know?
Yes, that's the word I come up with.
Just because I've had you on my podcast doesn't mean that you speak for all the Jewish people. Like you said, there's so many other people who are Jewish, but have also all these other identities you were, alluding to before that you don't have, which colors their experience in a different way than it does yours. And so, yeah, I'm so thrilled that I got to hear your story today, but I'm not going to act like I just heard the story of all the Jewish people of the world, and I can't speak for all the women of the world too.
Thank you very much for having me. It has been a pleasure and a nice break from everything else to kind of talk about stuff like this. Also just to catch up, because it has been a long time. It's great to see kind of the diverging but parallel paths that we are taking.
Yeah. I see it like that too. Yeah, that's cool. Well, the very last thing I want to end on is, I'll explain this a little bit, but in the language of this communication theory is we talk about turns. And so even this podcast, we've just created something new. We're putting something new out into the world, and that's going to lead to more turns. And so I like to think, what's a good next turn after this podcast for people who are listening, for you, for me? What's a good next turn? So, I mean, one, follow Zev on TikTok, buy his book. But I wonder if you can come up with any more good next turns.
If people want to read the book, I will send you the PDF. I don't make any money off the book. Like I don't get selling a book for $30. But in terms of a next turn to go, I don't think like pointing to a particular individual thing is the right move, but the turn of being curious about everyday things. Like I was talking about with eels, or my favorite article of 2022 was about the vending machine competition in industry and how much shit goes on in there. I write a newsletter that kind of brings some of that to light and talks about kind of data in our everyday lives, like ends with long form articles that are just cool. But looking like the window I've got right next to me, so much went into that window. And like there's a long history of probably really interesting feuds that went on about the window, about the way that it is brought up, the fact that there are bars outside many of the windows, especially at college campuses, and why that is. And I think so often we don't stop and question why things are the way they are. And I think it's not an exact turn, so I don't know if I gave you a possible answer, but the turn of like stopping.
Yeah.
And as a framework of like, look around where you are right now, listening to this right now. Is there something like weird? Because there's a lot of weird shit in the world, and it's really fun to like learn.
Next turn, be curious, learn something new, look for the story behind things around you. I think it's a great next turn.
Look for the stories about mundane things.
Yeah.
The supermarket cart. Axios or someone just published a great piece or The Guardian, I think was it, on like how we transport groceries around.
Uh-huh.
There's so much beef there.
Would have never known.
Right. Like you would never know if you didn't ask.
Mm-hmm. That's good. We'll keep learning new things is what we'll do.
Always.
Well, any final things you want to add, Zev?
I am just excited to be on here. Thank you very much for letting me at times info dump, and I apologize if I was sporadic at times, but there's so much on these topics. And I think it is remarkably difficult to, one, do what you do and like trying to figure out a way to compress all these topics. So I'm repeatedly impressed. And also,
yeah, well, I feel like we could talk for hours more. So yeah, a lot more to be said. Yeah,
easily. But no, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, that is all for our conversation with Zev. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time in dialogue with us, and keep in mind those next turns that we talked about. Of course, I get to do this podcast with support from the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution. They are the best people that I could ever ask for to collaborate with in our shared mission of creating a better social world. You can read about them on my website or check out their website, both of which I will link in the description. Please take time to share our conversation with someone in your life. My hope is that this podcast space can just be one big invitation into dialogue and an invitation to hear new stories and ask new questions and make new choices, and that invitation extends to everyone. So keep inviting people in. You can also follow the show wherever you listen. You can find me on Instagram at Stories Live Stories Told Pod. Find me on YouTube for some extra educational content at Stories Live Stories Told, and check my website, storiesliveStoriesTold.com. All of this I will link in the description. And please use any of those platforms to reach out. As always, I love to hear what this podcast means to you. I love to hear your questions, your ideas, so thank you in advance for sharing that. And thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious, and thank you for being a part of this story. Keep creating mindful moments, and until next time, I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told.